every AI system, every AI agent, regardless of domain, needs to have a very hard metric that it's optimizing for, and that outcome that it's ultimately trying to engender. Success in any one of these deployments is really contingent in having somebody who cares about the end customer, cares about the business, and is ready to work side by side with you to make sure that deployment can be successful. I think what's different now is that people who have deep domain expertise are probably going to be better product leaders and maybe even better founders than folks that are technologists.
Welcome back to Future Proof. Today, I sit down with Mike Gozzo, who is the Chief Product and Technology Officer at Ada. And we cover a wide range of topics on AI systems and how to effectively deploy them, to getting buy-in from your customers, both from an executive level and an implementation level. Both are important to make sure that AI agents succeed in the products that you're deploying. And then finally, just general philosophy on how AI agents work with your customers and how the customer feeling overall translates to successful outcomes when working with AI agents. So stay tuned. There's a lot to learn from Mike. Excited for you to hear this one. Hey everyone, welcome back to Future Proof. Today, I'm joined with Mike Gozzo, who's the Chief Product and Technology Officer at Ada. Ada is a platform for deploying AI customer service agents. So I'm really excited to chat with him today. Hey Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Nice to meet you, Ethan.
Awesome. So I want to talk about rethinking customer experience in the age of AI. I know you're obviously thinking a lot about this. And when I think about customer experience specifically, I feel like customer expectations have changed so much regarding support chatbots. They're not just like a little bit of triage before you pass off to a human agent anymore. Like in some cases, we're expecting fully automated resolutions. So I'm curious if, following that theme naturally, what's the future of customer experience in this AI first landscape, and how will companies start to think about things like human interventions and agent guidance?
It's a really good question. I actually think it's helpful to look at this not at all under the context of AI. I think this is one of these traps that we can get into as AI practitioners and looking at our technology as being the next great thing since sliced bread. But the reality is that delivering a great customer experience is really simple, because it's not about the technology. It's not even about the business. It's all about the feeling that you can engender in your customer. And to do that really well, you need to do a bunch of things. A bunch of things have to kind of line up and work together. A great example of what these look like when they're done right is if you pick many of the luxury hotels will tend to do this really well. Ritz-Carlton has got their concept of the 6 stars for customer service, right? Like going above and beyond the traditional expectation. Brands like the Four Seasons or Rosewood, they also push this to an incredible degree. And when you stay at one of these properties, what's interesting is that you feel like you are the only person there in many cases, right? It's not just a matter of the company knowing everything they possibly can about you. It's really about the fact that they've truly and unequivocally listened to you, and you can trust that they understand your needs and you're going to get through it. What AI has allowed companies to do is, rather than this type of customer service being something that a few luxury hotels that charge their guests thousands of dollars a night can do, is actually made it possible for the first time for many businesses around the world who, are struggling with increasingly growing support volumes and increasingly tight competition. AI is a great equalizer here, and it's allowing companies to make that happen. So what does AI first customer experience look like? I think it's not about any of the typical things that we associate to AI. It's actually to bring through like the best human quality support experiences and make them achievable, so that companies don't have to make a trade-off between quality of experience and cost of that experience. And that's a really powerful unlock, I think, for everybody in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think customers feeling like the AI agent on the other side actually understands the problem at hand instead of having canned responses is already a huge improvement, a step improvement overall. But I'm sure, at Ada, you're still thinking about the trust problem, like the perception problem when there's an AI agent on the other side. What are the hardest parts of delivering an experience that people come to trust naturally?
Trust is something that everyone is going to run into when they're building a generative AI application, regardless of the vertical that they're in. At Ada, we tend to service companies that are a bit on the larger scale. Our sweet spot is companies that have at least 300,000 annual contacts or more. And in many cases, we work with customers who are like banks and folks that are highly regulated and have millions of contacts per year. And the way to look at trust is that there's going to be trust violations the minute that you bring an LLM into the loop. No matter what kind of guardrail you have, no matter what kind of assurances that you hope to provide, you are going to have some kind of incident that stems from this. Usually it's not malicious, right? Usually it's going to come down to some document being outdated or something being off. So the right way to bring trust into a business, and what we found most successful, is to not look at this only as a technology problem. It's really similar to the last question that I answered, right? Which is, how do you think about the product you're developing and bringing to market, not just as a bunch of code that you've written, an application of the model and guardrails, all that stuff is there, but you can't just sell the tech. You've got to combine it with the right people that help actually bring companies that are AI curious or AI hopeful. You need the right people to guide them through and get them used to going through that transformation. And it takes like processes and practice and expertise at actually delivering these things repeatedly. It's no surprise that obviously like consultants are making a whole bunch of money in generative AI transformations right now, just like they made a whole bunch of money in digital transformations a decade ago and a whole bunch of money before that, bringing ERP systems into enterprises. I think this transition is very much similar to the rest. And I think the hardest part of actually building a company, particularly as a technologist, right? I've done a couple of startups, as you all know from my background, and I've had that experience of being in the garage in the Bay Area with my terminal and writing a bunch of code that actually solves a customer problem. And you learn really quickly as a startup founder that code is really cool and all, and it might get you your first pre-seed funding, but it doesn't actually impact customers in any real material way. And it's all about that hard work that comes afterwards, is how do you get somebody to actually trust that you're going to deliver outcomes that are not only like safe and predictable, but that are really aligned to what the business is trying to do and really understand what the business is trying to achieve. So the challenge really isn't making AI smarter or building more. It's about specifically being a person that can connect with the buyer and have them know that you're going to walk with them through this transition, because it's scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to continue on that thread a little bit, I'm sure that it basically sounds like when you work with these companies that are going through that transition, there's a couple key characteristics of people that need to be involved or bought in to make that transition successful. So things like keeping knowledge sources up to date or being able to update process to handle AI agent interactions. What are some of the key characteristics or recommendations maybe you've had for Ada customers to make that transition successful? Are there any things that stand out or lessons learned from that experience?
Sure. The first thing that we ask for, and really it's something that we even have in our contracts, where we are going to ensure that our customers have assigned a dedicated person to work with Ada, not only on the initial implementation, but also on the ongoing management of the system. In many cases, these systems can be fire and forget, right? They're extremely easy to get up and running to a point where they feel really powerful and really complete. But the danger comes once they go into production, and when all of those demos that worked really well in staging still work really well, but then real users throw things in all sorts of different directions that's hard to predict. All right, your evals, the evaluation test sets that you build can only get you so far. Success in any one of these deployments is really contingent in having somebody who cares about the end customer, cares about the business, and is ready to work side by side with you to make sure that deployment can be successful. The other thing that we found is really important is to get alignment at the top. And another thing that we insist on whenever we work with a customer is making sure they have a named executive who's sponsoring this and who's aware of the outcomes. And the reason for this is that when you hire an AI agent, it's very much like hiring a new human member of your team. And their immediate manager is going to have a bunch of very specific tactical things and metrics that they're trying to hit, and they're going to directly optimize those. But it is extremely helpful that beyond the implementation, there is someone who's thinking about and engaging in discussions of where is this going next? What's the broader impact in the business going to be? How do we set it up for that? Because often what it'll take when we think of how these AI agents become most successful, it's not just because they can retrieve some content from a knowledge base, reformat it so it's a specific answer and regurgitate it back. That's pretty simple. A lot of the resolution that we see and that we're most proud of and that like really impacts customers are ones where the conversations with the AI agent happen in a way that the AI agent is deeply understanding and then deeply resolving the question by using a bunch of different tools, but combining their outputs together and getting it done. If you think of an enterprise that we'll typically deal with, connecting to all of the different systems and capabilities that this business data is housed in, that these operations can be performed in, is really complex. A lot of them still don't have APIs. Folks are talking about opening up MCP servers, and we see that sometimes where some of our customers give us an MCP server and they've got some science project there. But there's a lot of real barriers that need to get pushed through. And having an executive sponsor aligned to the project, who's got their name on it, who wants to see this succeed, who's leading that AI transformation, opens the door because it gives your manager so much more power to work within their organization to get what they need done. So we've seen that as being like one of the really key things that we need to have in place to make these successful.
Yeah, I love that. Both executive buy-in at the top level to help guide the vision of how the AI agent can be used in other areas of the company, but also someone tactical that can actually implement things on the ground and help make sure that the agent is effective in the short term as well.
And it's great because I think right now we're at a time we're at a really interesting time where companies that are smaller, that are just getting started, they can, because of what they've been able to produce and build, they can get a lot of attention and a lot of mind share from traditional enterprise, from traditional business. We got invited, I was at, believe it or not, Bill Gates' house 2 years ago with a bunch of Fortune 500 CEOs having dinner. And everyone that I spoke to wanted me to come in and talk to them about how AI can impact their business in this way, in the way that Ada does by automating customer support inquiries. And it led to growth for us. It led to a ton of really interesting discussions and learnings coming out of it. We're at a moment in time where there's a lot of belief from board level down and the biggest corporations in the world that they need to get this done. And there aren't many people right now who have figured out how to do that. And I think that's a really interesting opportunity for folks that are building AI agents in every industry, where there's a moment in time where there's like a tiny wedge that's open and competition can be really exciting.
Absolutely. There's a huge opportunity there, and I definitely agree. I'm curious, as you work with some of these large enterprises too, you mentioned millions of contacts potentially. How does one sift through all of those different types of interactions and make sure that the quality of the agent responses are improving over time? So you mentioned there are people that are involved in basically extending the eval set to make sure that there are more and more interactions that the AI can learn from. But how do you get to those interactions that really like the agent can improve upon?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing that matters, and we skip this at the beginning, but I think it's a really important baseline, is every AI system, every AI agent, regardless of domain, needs to have a very hard metric that it's optimizing for, and that outcome that it's ultimately trying to engender. For Ada, we call that metric automated resolution. And the way that we measure automated resolution is we ask another large language model to do it. And it reads every transcript, and it's evaluating on the basis of criteria and essentially trying to assess whether or not we've deeply resolved the customer issue. We don't use like deterministic signals like some ticket got closed or the customer went away or the customer said thanks. We really look at were the responses that came into the questions, were they relevant? Were they accurate? Were they safe? Did they actually go as far as possible to resolve the issue or not? And this, like building this metric in became really important. One, it allows us to price on that basis. We can price on outcomes. And when we price on outcomes, contrary to other companies who might price on a resolution, because ours is LLM judged, it can be thought of as subjective. We have a process in our billing where we allow our customers to audit on a quarterly basis. We take a sample of conversations. We have human auditors look at it. We have our LLM associate. Our agreement rates are above 90%. So we have a very high agreement between a human judge and an LLM judge on whether or not conversations can be resolved. That powers pretty much everything else within our product. Because we've aligned with the customers who buy Ada, that optimizing this metric is the most important thing. It means that when you're looking at failure cases, it becomes a simple matter of looking at conversations that were marked as failed. The LLM obviously annotates what the reason for failure was, and it creates a great working set to then start optimizing how the system performs. At Ada, what that means is we allow anyone who's reviewing a conversation to provide natural language feedback to the model about what could have been better. Think of the way you would provide feedback during a one-on-one to one of your employees, and corrective feedback that helps them improve. And you'll get a real-time view of, okay, with that feedback, this is how I would have approached this conversation. Play it back and we'll let you know whether or not it was successful. So I think the first thing, the way that you sort through all of this data is really making sure you have one metric that is extremely clear, that you've aligned on with your customer, and that becomes your guide through the mess. And as you do that, and you keep on replaying your system through changes that you've made, you can see that metric iteratively improve over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a super interesting idea, having LLM be involved in the judging of that outcome, because I'm sure you get a lot more fine-grained information about why this interaction failed, or there's more of a gradient that's possible about resolved versus failed, and what are the kind of sub outcomes in between that maybe succeeded or failed as well.
And this is not, again, going back to my original point, like nothing here is AI specific. The LLM is doing the job only because it's cost effective. Otherwise, we'd have a bunch of humans doing the job. I don't think they do the job as well. The LLM is extremely good at doing this. And this is happening in contact centers all over the world. Every contact center, particularly anything that's outsourced, they're going to have what's called a QA scorecard that they've built for their agents that looks at a set of conversations on a weekly basis. Those conversations are going to be evaluated not only for resolution, but are going to be evaluated on 6, 10, 12 different criteria that are specific to the business. That might be about their brand alignment, that might be about mentioning some promotion, whatever matters to the business and whatever they've told their agents to do. And if ever, I don't know if you've ever worked in a contact center. I did very early on in my career, summer jobs. And I remember the weekly meeting with your quality person who would play back your calls and play back the ones where you messed up and give you feedback specifically on that. And that's essentially how the ADA system works. And I think most successful AI agents are taking a similar thing, right? Let's take a panel of metrics that can be used to determine quality. Let's have LLMs judge them and judge unstructured data really well, and then give the customers tools to manage that and improve it over time on those metrics, really mirroring human methods.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Do you find that those companies that already have QA scorecards for their call centers or their customer support experience can pretty directly bring those into ADA and then find that they work pretty well? Or
All the
are there
time.
other things that they have?
All the time. And this is, I would say, every scaled contact center has this process. There's an entire industry of tools that build contact center QA for humans right now, and it's existed for decades and is a really common thing. I think LLMs are automating that just like they're automating the actual responses. Now, instead of sampling with technology like this, companies are applying this to every single conversation in real time and not waiting for somebody to go and read transcripts or listen to calls to be able to provide that feedback. So all of this points to the net effect of AI being one where you're learning much faster, you're changing much faster, you're improving much faster. But everyone is essentially replicating the same techniques that have worked. And I think that goes to anyone building an AI product right now, is that the way that you start off doing these things, it's very tempting, especially as an engineer, to think of how you bring your model together, how you bring your eval chain together, how are you going to chain your prompts, and what architecture you're going to use. That all matters at some point, and you got to think about that really deeply. But I think what's different now is that people who have deep domain expertise are probably going to be better product leaders and maybe even better founders than folks that are technologists. And I wonder, if I was starting my career now as a technologist, as an engineer by training, would I be as good as somebody who came from the contact center or who came from one of these fields and deeply understood what it was like on the ground in the bullpen to get the job done? And I think that's true about every vertical that these are applied to now, and it's pretty fun.
Yeah. Yeah, just the underlying technology is transforming companies and the way they interact. The set of skills that make you effective in that space are also transforming at the
That's
same
right.
pace. Yeah, absolutely. I want to transition over to how practically Ada is able to ground those interactions to be more truthful, more reliable, and specifically around retrieval and reasoning with your LLM. At Paragon, we often support customers in getting retrieval access to all of these different knowledge sources that people have. We just released a syncing product that actually allows you to pull in all the knowledge-based data. How do you all think about that retrieval component when you build Ada's AI experiences?
So it's extremely important. I would say there's a lot of innovation that has gone into retrieval for our use case. We typically will have focus on retrieval for publicly accessible content or public facing content. We also do retrieval for internal content, but I'll get to that in a second. For public facing stuff, a lot of the work that we do is in pre-processing content at sync moment to increase the chance that we will generate a very grounded and accurate response. Some of the work we do there is we apply a technique where we read through an article in its entirety and then chunk it not using document structure, but we chunk it conceptually and try and anticipate questions that may be asked about the surface. And then we'll embed and index very specific topics within an article. We do a bunch of techniques that look like that in different scenarios, and we abstract away the actual connection into different knowledge bases. We could use something like your tool to be able to do that. We might work directly with a knowledge base, or in many cases, our customers have very custom things that they connect in via an API that we offer. But in all cases, we spend a lot of time pre-processing knowledge content that we bring in to improve the odds that we are going to be able to retrieve successfully. That's often the foundation for a lot of this. But then beyond that, in the system, we talk sometimes about memory. We haven't talked about memory in this conversation yet, but memory and all of the feedback that's been provided to the AI agent over time, those are internal instructions. And you can't bring it all to the agent in every interaction because it'll just be confusing, right? Imagine if you were trying to answer a question and you had everything your boss ever told you in the back of your mind, and it would be hard to know what you should do in that given situation. So we use different retrieval techniques for those internal pieces of feedback and how we bring them in and how we apply them so that we get the most contextually relevant information into the prompt and have the best chance of having an adherent, successful resolution.
Yeah. The pre-processing part seems really important too, because you don't really have the benefit of a human agent just having short-term memory or just being able to just recall something off the fly and then saying, oh, I just need to quickly brief over this document that I know is related to this question. And so when we think about AI agents responding, there's this threshold of acceptable speed, I would imagine, that we can spend a ton of time on reasoning tokens, just continuously improving the quality of the answer. But I'm sure there's some level of, at some point, we need to stop reasoning and just start to provide a response. Is that something that you guys...
I think that we think about that a lot. I can't go into too many details there because we've got a patent that we're writing on that subject specifically. I think the way to think about this is there's a lot of value in thinking about what information should be off the cuff and what shouldn't, like glossary data, really good example of something that the system should always know and should be top of mind. Others, it could be a little slower to access and so on. There's a lot you can play with there. But that's exactly it. Latency, particularly for a company like Ada, where we provide service to, let's say, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of customer phone calls, right? Using the same generative application as we do on messaging and email. Latency becomes really important, and there's a lot to happen behind the scenes you still have a system that needs to spend time thinking, needs to spend time calling tools and working with those results. But you also want to be able to provide interruptibility, you want to provide fast responses, you want to be able to create that experience and make sure it feels right. We have a lot of evaluations, obviously, that we run on our stack that look at the content that's being generated. But at the end of the day, when I hire a product manager and have them, or even an engineering leader, and have them look at our system, one big thing that I'm looking for is how much taste do they have on the customer experience? Because the overall feel of the system when it's put together is something that we're optimizing for. And unfortunately, I don't have that dialed into anything more than just good taste. And it comes down to really looking at that feel and obsessing about getting it better and better. I still don't think we're at the level that we're capable of doing, and I'm being pleased about the improvements that we keep on making. But that is what keeps me up at night, is how do I make this feel really great?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. And it really goes back to what you said at the very beginning, which is that it is all about how the customer feels or reacts to the responses, whether it's an AI agent or whether it's a person at the other end. Mm-hmm. I guess that leads me to this question around when customers feel comfortable rolling out an AI system to act autonomously or just be put in front of customers. You mentioned that Ada customers, they have the ability to test an agent out and try some responses before they actually deploy. Mm-hmm. What kind of threshold people working in that test environment before they feel like they can roll this out? And does that vary across different industries or company sizes, maybe the different types of questions that they might be expected to answer?
Absolutely. It varies by modality. On the phone, folks will often start with one branch of an IVR tree, right? Press 1 for sales, 2 for support. They might just only put Ada behind the press 2 for support. until they built some confidence and they put it everywhere. We're seeing that happen a number of whether it's use case driven, whether it's system availability driven. Some folks that have hospitality, you see this a lot. There could be a lot of really archaic stuff that is dealing with things like hotel booking, where integration for certain larger hotels isn't as straightforward as you think. Those often might need some kind of human layer just because the technology is not ready. But what's really interesting in this space is that it becomes very easy to report on, call it topics or goals that customers are trying to resolve and problems they're trying to solve, and identify where there's a very clear ROI of opening up so more can be automated. And it becomes pretty much a dollars and cents driven decision in many cases, when you see that not only can you like save a whole bunch of time doing it, but you can actually have a much snappier, cleaner experience come through. So we don't take a very like opinionated line at the beginning. Like our hope is that we can work with customers to automate their most pressing needs, and we'll listen to what those are. But as part of, remember at the beginning I said, we don't just deliver our technology. We work with you over time and make it better. A lot of work that we do with your team becomes on like, how do we take a vision that you have for broader automation and actually achieve that? And how do we build trust? How do we build the ability to do this? That's how we think about it.
Yeah. Is there a particular modality that you find that is largely very successful for a company that's just AI curious, as you mentioned earlier?
It really depends on the business, right? I would say that in terms of a pure ROI perspective, voice automation tends to trump it all. Calls are expensive to handle, and they're expensive to handle well. I like some of our customers allow us to listen to their voice conversations, and it is amazing. We listen to some of them, and you have a senior citizen who's on the line and obviously calls in with a thorny, like billing related question to some service, and hearing the system patiently explain it to them, walk them through it, hearing the gratitude in their voice at the end of it. And there's nothing more motivating. And I think when you can hear that, it becomes way more visceral than seeing a couple of things typed quickly into a chatbot. But I think the impact is really everywhere. And the proof is in the pudding. When it has been in business for 9 years now. And when I joined the company, actually Ada and my previous startup started up at the same time. My company got acquired by Zendesk. I went on to become SVP product at Zendesk. I invested in Ada along the way. And then I decided to leave Zendesk because I didn't like where they were going from an AI perspective, even though I was leading product in that domain. Yeah, I didn't feel that we were going to make it given the way that business model was built, and I wanted to go to an AI native company. And when I joined Ada, the company had been in business then for about 6 years and had a very successful scripted traditional chatbot working. And one of the first things I did, particularly with the advent of ChatGPT that made this a way easier bet to sell to our board and to our founders, was essentially rewrite the product. So it would be a completely LLM reasoning driven architecture. And we were able to deliver that. And that when you're able to pull off transformations like this and you see the before and after, we saw customers in our previous generation product that would have, say, an average customer satisfaction score of 50%. And if we looked at our deep resolution metric, where we went down deep and actually looked at whether or not we were resolving conversations, we were resolving 30% of the inquiries. We were containing 90%. So customers were getting cost savings, but their customers weren't getting great experience because 70% of the time they were unresolved. When we deployed the first iterations of our generative product, that jumped up to 50%. Today, when we look at many of our customers, they're beating a 70% resolution rate, and they're beating an 80% customer satisfaction rate. Why this matters is that we're now beating human performance of an average human contact center agent on any modality. This is a really big deal. And we just hit that in the last 6 months, right? We hit that in the last 6 months because models have gotten better, our system's gotten better, we've learned from more customers and more data. And we're at this really exciting time now where customers that are measuring their AI's performance, not against some unrealistic pie in the sky, perfect, super intelligent AI mode, but that are having their AI agents compete directly in a metrics driven space with their human agents, we're now beating them. And I think that's a real big inflection point that our whole industry is going to see, and that's going to have ripples through the economy soon.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's super exciting and incredible job to you and your team for achieving that. I love that first example that you gave too, just of the in the voice conversation with maybe someone a little older, and I maybe under-indexed on the importance of the infinite patience that an LLM can have during a conversation and how that can really translate to just higher quality conversations in general and higher customer satisfaction.
It's all
Speaking
about
from
the feel, right? At the end of the day, it's all about the feel. And the best customers that we work with are customers that are not only trying to optimize for their cost savings, and there's a lot of ways you can get that. Our whole people process platform approach is to work with customers who actually care about their customer experience, that aspire to be the Four Seasons, that aspire to be the Ritz-Carlton, right? That's what we want to deliver. So we spend a lot of time really thinking about those seniors, calling into that number, getting their help, and making sure that it's actually working and it's actually understandable to them. And that'll be the case for a more traditional company that's serving retired folks, but then we can pivot over to modern fintech where millennials are going to do their investments or whatever the case is. And in those, the tone is different, and Ada needs to be able to context switch and code switch to be able to work in that environment as well. And what's really amazing here is we're talking about one platform, one piece of software that's self-managed by the business that buys it to deliver those outcomes. And I think it's enabling some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, Mike, thank you so much for sharing about how you're transforming customer experience support across different companies. Really appreciate all the insights that you've shared, and thanks for joining us on Future Proof.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube to get all the latest episodes. And to view our past episodes, visit us at useparagon.com/futureproof.